In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do arm rigging using inverse kinematics in Blender. Now, if you'd like to learn the complete process on how to model and rig a basic character, then I have tutorials on basic character modeling and basic character rigging, links in the description if you'd like to check out those tutorials. And if you'd like to use the same arm model that I'm using, then I will have a free download of the project files for this tutorial with the link in the description. And you can use the project files to follow along, or you can use this on your own character if you've already created one. And if you'd like to help support me and this channel, then checking out my Gumroad store and Patreon page are really great ways to help support me and the channel. And then just one more thing before we start, I wanted to thank this video's sponsor, Sketchfab. On Sketchfab, you can upload your own 3D models and preview them in your browser. You can even view them in AR, VR, or on a phone or tablet. You can also purchase 3D models and assets from Sketchfab's model store. You can even apply to sell your own models on the platform. Check out Sketchfab with the link in the description. Alright, so here is the startup Blender file with the basic arm model. So again, if you'd like to follow along, you can download the free project files for this tutorial with the link in the description, or you can model your own character's arm if you have a character you've already created. So the first thing that I'm going to do is hold down the Shift and S button, and I'm going to move my mouse over to cursor to world origin and then let go, and that's just going to ensure that the 3D cursor is in the very center there of the 3D scene. And I want it in the very center there so that when I add the armature, it's going to be added right there in the center. So I can now press Shift A, and Shift A will bring up the add menu, and I'm going to go right down here to armature, and then I'm going to select the single bone. Now there are a couple settings that I want to change with this bone. So if you select the bone, you can click right over here on the object data properties. The icon is a little stick figure, and I want to open up the viewport display. So there's two things that I want to do. The first thing that I want to do is check the in front, and that way this bone is going to be in front of any of the mesh, so it'll be really easy to see. And then the other thing that I want to do is I want to click on the display as, and I'm going to change this to B bone instead. You don't have to use this if you don't want to, but I prefer the B bone. And why I like the B bone is because you can change the visual size of the bone. Alright, so we just have one bone, but I want to be able to edit this bone. So I'm going to press tab, and that will take me into edit mode of the bones. You can also just click right here and change it to edit mode. So I'm now going to select the top of the bone, and I'm going to press 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and I'm going to press G to grab and just kind of move this down. And also, just for demonstration purposes, I am going to have kind of like a shoulder bone. So I'm going to click on the back of the bone right here and press G to grab. And I'm just going to like stick this over here, and then I will select the front of the bone and I'll press G to grab and just stick the bone right here. So wherever these circles are, or wherever the end of the bone is, that is where the bone is going to rotate. So there is going to be a joint in between each bone. So make sure you put the end of the bone wherever you want it to rotate. So because this is the shoulder, I'm going to put it right about there. Now you can see this bone is very thick, so you can select the center of the bone, and then you can press Ctrl-Alt-S. And Ctrl-Alt-S is going to change the visual size of the bone, so it's going to change the thickness, but it's not actually going to change where the bone is. And that will work if you have the viewport display set to B bone. Alright, so I now need to extrude out the other bones, so I'm going to select the circle here, and I'm going to press the E key, and the E key is going to extrude out bones. So I'm going to bring this bone right here, because that is where the elbow is going to be. You can also press 7 on the numpad to go to top view, and you can see I need to double tap the A key to select everything, and press G to grab, and I'm going to hit Y to bring it back on the Y axis, and I'll just stick it there. So I'm now going to select the circle again, the end of the bone here, and I'm going to press E to extrude, and that is going to extrude out another bone, and then I can place it right there. Then I'm going to press E to extrude again, and this is just going to be a small bone kind of right here, and then I'll press E to extrude again, just stick this one kind of right there in the center, and then E to extrude again, and we'll put this all the way down there. And then I can press 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and I'll press G to grab, kind of stick this down here. I can also hold down the Z button and go over to wireframe and let go. That'll go into wireframe, and then that way I can select the joints right there and press G to grab and just kind of stick them right in there in the center. And it is important that you put the bones pretty much in the center of the mesh, so inside the mesh. And then I'm also going to bring this down a little bit, and I will select this one and bring it down a little bit. Now if your character has fingers, that's totally fine. You can just go back here and then select this circle here, and you can press E to extrude, and you can extrude extrude out more bones for each finger, and you could just continue to do that by like extruding out all these bones here and creating all the fingers. I'm not going to do that though because my character just has like a mitten hand, so I'm going to press Ctrl Z to undo that, but it's really easy just to select the circle there and then extrude out more bones for all the fingers. Now I do want to extrude out a couple bones here for the thumb, so I'm going to press 7 on the numpad for top view, and then I can just press E to extrude. We're going to extrude out a bone there, just click to place that, maybe about there, and then E to extrude, and we'll put another one there. And then you can press the 1 on the numpad to go to the front view, and I can press G to grab, and you can hit Z to bring it down on the Z axis, and just kind of make sure it's inside there, and just kind of bring this down a little bit more, so something like that. Alright, that is pretty good. So now what I want to do is I want to create some controller bones for the inverse kinematics, or IK. So the 2 IK bones that I want to have is one bone over here to control where the elbow is rotating, and then the other one is going to be one bone right here, and the bone that's right here is going to move the entire arm and also rotate the wrist. So I'm going to select this bone right here, and then I want to duplicate it, so I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate, and then I can just right click so it hops back to the very center. Now if I press G to grab, you can see that there's that little line there, and so that is telling us that the bone is parented to another bone. So I'm going to right click, or you can also just hit the escape key to go out of that. So I want to unparent this bone so that it is separate. So what I'm going to do is press Alt P with that bone selected, and I'm going to click on clear parent. So if you press G to grab, you can see there's not that checkered line there, so I can just right click to bring that back to the center there. So now what I want to do is I want to make this bone bigger just so that we can tell it apart. So I'm going to press Ctrl Alt S. So Ctrl Alt S is going to change the visual size of the bone. So I'm just going to bring that out. So now it is kind of like a square. All right, so that is that one. So I now want to make another bone for where the elbow is going to be and where the elbow is going to rotate. So I'm going to select this circle right here, and I'm going to press 7 on the numpad to go to the top view. Let's press E to extrude. So E is going to extrude out bones, and then I can hit Y to bring it over on the Y axis, and I'll just place it there. Now if I select this bone and press G to grab, you can see it's pulling on the other bones. It's pulling the other bones along with it. So I'm just going to select this bone, and then again, just like with the other IK bone, I'm going to press Alt P, and then I want to click on it clear parent, and that way I can press G to grab, and then I can hit Y to bring it on the Y axis, and I'll just bring that out, and I'm just going to bring it kind of about here. And then I'm also going to press S to scale and just scale that down a little bit, and then just like this bone, I want to make it a bit thicker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Ctrl Alt S, and Ctrl Alt S again will change the visual scale of the bone. So now this bone is going to control the rotation of the elbow. All right, so I'm now going to rename all the bones. So what I'm going to do is click right here to go to the bone properties. So it's a little icon of a bone. So I'm now just going to select each bone and I'm going to rename it. So I'm just going to select this bone here. I can click right here, and that is going to rename it, and I can just rename this to like shoulder, and then I can click right here, and then I can click here to rename this, and I'm going to call this like upper arm. You can really just rename it to whatever makes sense to you. So I can click on this one, and I'm going to rename this one to lower arm, and then I'm going to click on this one right here. This one I'm going to rename to elbow. Let's also click on this one here, and this one I'm going to rename to wrist. And then also I'm going to hold down the Z button, go into the wireframe so I can see these bones here. So I'm going to select this one here, and then this bone right in here that's inside the other bone, I'm just going to rename that to hand, and then I'll also click on this one, and I can just call this like finger 1, and then I will click on this one, and this one I'm going to rename to like finger 2, and then let's click on this one right here, and I'm going to rename this to like thumb 1, and then one more, I'll click on this one here, and I can rename this to thumb 2. Alright, so we are now ready to set up the inverse kinematics so that the bones can work together, because for instance, when I move this one, I want this one to move the rotation of the elbow, and when I move this bone, this big one right here, I want this to be able to move the entire arm and then also rotate the wrist. So I'm going to press Ctrl Z to undo that, just bring that back there. So what I'm going to do in edit mode is I'll actually click right here, and I'm going to go into pose mode of the bone. So we are now in pose mode. So what I'm now going to do is click on this bone right here, the smaller bone that's inside the bigger bone right here. So just select that one, and then I'm going to click right over here to the bone constraint properties. So now let's add the inverse kinematics. So I can click on add bone constraint, and I'm going to add the inverse kinematics kinematics. Now this might look a little bit complex, but don't worry, I'll show you how to set this all up. So the first thing that we want to do is set the target, and the target is basically just the entire armature. So you can just click right here, and if you only have one armature, you can just select the armature. You can see right here in the outliner, it's just the entire armature object. So just select the armature that you are using. In this case, it's just this armature right here. It's the only one I have. So now within this armature, we need to select a bone which is going to actually control the arm. So I'm going to click on this bone right here, and this is why it was really important that we rename the bone so we can actually tell which bone is which. So I want to select the wrist. So select the wrist bone. I renamed this bone to wrist, so add that bone right in there. Now you can see that something is wrong. This bone is kind of moving over, and so basically what this bone is doing is it's moving over to the very starting of this bone, because this bone we just selected here in this option. And so what we need to do to fix this bone moving to the back of this other bone, is we just need to turn off the use tail, because I don't want to use the use tail, so I'm going to uncheck that, and then that bone is going to be brought back to its default position. So if I now select this bone right here, I can press G to grab, and you can see it's moving the entire arm. Now there are a few problems. One problem is that if I rotate this, it's not moving the hand, so we will fix that. Another problem is that it is moving the shoulder as well, and I just want it to move the arms but not the shoulder. And then also we still need to set up this bone right here. So what you can do if you've moved all the bones around is you can double tap the A key to select all the bones, and then to bring them back to their default position, make sure you're in pose mode when you do this. To bring them back to their default position, you can hit Alt R, and that's going to clear any rotations. Alt G, that's going to clear any locations, and then Alt S, and that will clear any scale. So just hit Alt R, Alt G, and Alt S. So I'm going to click back on the yellow bone because that is the one with the IK. So you can see that there's that yellow line there, and the yellow line is going all the way to the end of the armature. And so that is showing us that this bone is going to move all of the armature. But I don't want it to move the entire armature, I just want it to move the arm. So what we can do is we can turn up the chain length. So on default, the chain length is set to 0, and so that's telling it just to move all the bones. But if I turn the chain length up to 1, now it's just going to move one bone. So if I select this bone and press G to grab, you can see it's just moving one bone that is behind it. I'm going to click back on the yellow bone, and I want to set the chain length to 2. So now that it's set to 2, if I click on this bone and press G to grab, you can see it's just moving the arm. So that is exactly what I want. So I'm just going to select this bone again, and I'll press Alt G to clear any movements. Now another thing we need to add is we need to make this bone be able to rotate the elbow. So I'm going to click back over here, click back on the yellow bone, and to set this up, we're going to add this as the pull target. So first you can click on the pull target, and again, just like the target right up here, all we want to do is we want to select this armature. So just select the armature. Now for this one right here, the pull target bone, we want to click on this, and we want to select the elbow. So the elbow is this bone right here. So if you forgot what you renamed it to, just click on this. You can see it's renamed to elbow. So just click back over here on the yellow bone and make sure you select the elbow. Now when I selected that bone, you can see something rotated. So if I click on the X to get rid of that, you can see it rotated back. So I'm going to click on this and then just click on elbow again. You can see it moves. So why this is moving is because of this pull angle. So what we need to do is just change the pull angle to rotate it back to the rotation that we want. Now usually you're just going to need to change this to either a value of 90 or either a value of -90. So you can just try that out. You can change the pull angle to 90, but you can see that is now moving the elbow over, so it's moving it farther away, and that's because it's rotating it. But instead, I'm going to bring this all the way back to -90. So I'm actually just going to type in -90, and you can see now that is rotating a bit more this way. So you can just rotate that pull angle until it is moving the closest to this one. So now you can see it's kind of just rotating back just slightly. So it's facing this now. So if I select this bone, I can press G to grab and just kind of move that up. And then I can select this bone and I can press R to rotate. And you can see now the elbow is going to follow along with this bone. And then again, you can double tap the A key to select all the bones, and you can press Alt G to clear any location values of the bone, just to bring all the bones back to the very center. All right, now there is another really important thing. I want to be able to rotate this bone and have this bone rotate the entire wrist and rotate the entire hand. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another bone constraint. So click on this bone right here, and if I rotate this bone, you can see it's rotating the entire hand. So what I'm going to do now is click on Add Bone Constraint, and I'm going to go right down down here and I'm going to add a copy rotation. So then scroll down here to the copy rotation, and on the target, I want to click on this. And again, I just want to select this armature. So I'm going to click on armature. And then on the bone here, I'm going to click on this, and I want to select the wrist because I want the wrist to have control. So I'm going to click on the wrist. And now if I click on this right here, the wrist, I can press G to grab, and then I can press R to rotate, and you can see this bone not only has control of the arm, but it also has control of the wrist. Now this entire time, these bones aren't moving the mesh, so it's now time to parent the mesh to the bones. But before we do that, there is one really important thing. We don't want these two IK bones to move the mesh, because these two IK bones move the other bones, which in turn move the mesh. So to tell these bones to not move the mesh, just click on this bone, and then you're going to click right over here on the bone properties. And we want to turn off the deform. So just uncheck the deform, click on this other one as well, and turn off the deform. This way, these bones are not going to move the mesh. They're only going to move the bones, but then these other bones will move the mesh. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is click on pose mode, and I'm going to go back to object mode, and I can also hold down the Z button and go back into the solid view. So what I'll do now in object mode is just select the mesh, hold down the shift key, and then select the bones. Now to parent the bones to the mesh, I'm going to press Control P. Control P is going to bring up the parent settings, and I'm going to click on automatic weights. And so when you do this with the automatic weights, Blender is automatically going to do the best job that it can to parent the mesh to the bones. So now what I can do is I can just select the bones, and then I can click right here on the object mode and go to pose mode, or you can also press Control Tab. So Control Tab is the shortcut key to go into pose mode. And I can now select the bones, and you can see it's moving around the mesh. Now if I move these around, you can see some things are not working exactly how I want. Like for instance, when I move the arm, it's also moving the shoulder, and I don't really want that. And so what you can do is you can actually manually edit the weight paint of each bone. So you can manually edit how the bone controls the mesh. So to do this, I'm going to click on pose mode, and I'm going to go back to object mode. So I will now select the armature in object mode, and then I'm going to hold down the shift key and then select the mesh. Then what I can do with both of these selected, but with the mesh selected last, is I can click on object mode and I can go to the weight paint. So now what you can do is you can just use whichever mouse button you use to select, and you can select different bones. Now I use the right click select, but left click select is now the default. So you're probably using the left click. So just left click and select the different bones, and it's actually going to show you a visual representation of how each bone is moving the mesh. So if the weight paint is red, that part of the mesh is fully being moved along with the bone. But as the color gets more and more blue, it's going to be affected less and less, and then when it is the dark blue, it's not going to be moved at all. So for instance, if I select this bone right here, this bone is moving all of the red area, but then it's slowly moving less and less of the mesh, and then it's not moving any of the blue area. So we can actually paint on the mesh to change how it's affected. So for instance, on this bone right here, this bone kind of has a light blue right here on the shoulder, and I don't want that because I don't want the shoulder to be moved along with this bone. So what I can do is I can actually just click right up here, click on this icon, and then we have some different brushes. I want to remove color, so I'm going to change this to subtract. And then you can also change the radius and the strength of your brush right here. So I can now just click and drag, and you can see that I am turning this back to a dark blue. And as I turn it to a dark blue, you can see it's actually going back to its original shape. So now if I select the main controller bone and press G to grab, you can see the shoulder isn't being moved along as much now because I weight painted that and manually changed how it's moving the mesh. So you can just continue to select different bones, and you can add value or you can remove value. So for instance, on this bone right here, if I hold down the Z button, go over to wireframe, I want to add a little bit more value to this one. So what I can do is click right here on these weight paint settings, and instead of subtract, I want to add value. So I'm going to change this instead to add. So then what I can do is I can just start to paint here, and I can add more value where I want this bone to control the mesh more. So now I can just rotate this, and you can see it pulls along more of the mesh where that is red. So you can just continue to do this by clicking on different bones, and you can click right here, and you can either use the add to add color or the subtract to remove color. Now if you select these bones right here, here, these two IK bones, they make the mesh pink, and why that is because we turned off the deform, because again, we don't want these bones to move the mesh, we just want these bones to move the other bones, but then the other bones move the mesh. And then once you are done with the weight painting, you can just click on weight paint, and you can go back to object mode. And then I'm going to hold down the Z button and go back into the solid view. So then I will select the armature, just select the armature, I'll press Control Tab, and that'll go into pose mode, and then I can just select the bones and move them around. And that is it. So that is how you do basic arm rigging in Blender. And again, if you'd like to learn how to model and rig a complete basic character, then I have tutorials on basic character modeling and basic character rigging. I'll have the links in the description. And I will also be releasing a tutorial on how to do leg rigging in Blender, so if you'd like to check that out, again, link is in the description. And if you'd like to help support me and this channel, I will also have links in the description to my Gumroad store and Patreon page. Those are great ways to help support the channel. So I hope this tutorial was helpful, and thank you for watching.